When I signed the deed for my dream cabin, I thought I'd finally found the perfect escape, 40 quiet acres of pine-covered hills and a weathered log home just begging for a loving renovation. I imagined weekend hikes, fresh mountain air, and evenings by a crackling fireplace. But on my very first day with the keys in my pocket, a pair of uniformed security officers stormed up my gravel driveway and demanded I leave. Their next words made my blood run cold. Before I tell you how this turned into a showdown with a homeowners association I didn't even belong to, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the jaw-dropping finale. This story proves that owning property isn't always as simple as signing papers. I'd been saving for this cabin for nearly a decade. City life, and the endless noise of car horns and sirens, had been grinding me down for years. The moment I found the listing for a rustic 2-bedroom cabin tucked deep into the Blue Ridge foothills, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just a property, it was a promise of peace. After weeks of paperwork, inspections, and sleepless nights worrying about financing, the closing finally happened. On a bright Friday morning in early spring, I slid the heavy brass key into the lock, inhaled the sharp scent of pine, and felt my shoulders loosen for the first time in years. Inside, the cabin was exactly as I remembered, rough-hewn beams, wide plank floors, and a stone fireplace that looked as if it had hosted generations of winter gatherings. Sure, the roof needed work, the plumbing was antique at best, and a family of determined squirrels had clearly been renting the attic, but to me it was perfect. I spent the morning unloading tools, sketching renovation ideas, and savoring the silence. Around noon, I was kneeling on the porch measuring a rotted railing when the crunch of tires on gravel broke the quiet. 2 white SUVs with green community security decals rolled to a stop beside my truck. A tall man with mirrored sunglasses stepped out first. His partner, a woman in a crisp navy uniform, followed a second later. Neither smiled. "Sir, you're trespassing," the man barked before I could even stand. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "This property is part of Pine Hollow Estates. Only approved residents are allowed on these grounds. We need you to leave immediately." I set my tape measure down slowly. "You must have been in the wrong place. I bought this cabin last month." "Here," I patted my jacket pocket where the deed rested in an envelope. "I have the paperwork." The woman crossed her arms. "That's impossible. Pine Hollow is a gated HOA community. No sales have been approved here in over a year." Now my stomach tightens. I'd done my homework, this cabin was miles outside the HOA boundary lines. My realtor had shown me maps and tax records proving it. "I'm not in your HOA," I said firmly. "This property is in Maple County, outside Pine Hollow's jurisdiction. You can check the parcel number if you'd like." The man smirked. "Our board president says otherwise. Until this is sorted out, you need to vacate. Right now." Their words weren't just rude, they carried an edge of threat. The woman's hand rested near the radio clipped to her belt as if she expected trouble. I forced a calm smile. "Look, I'm not leaving my own land. Why don't we call the county recorder's office and clear this up?" They exchanged a glance that told me they had no intention of making any calls. "Last warning," the man said. "Pack your things. We'll be back with enforcement if you're still here." They turned on their heels and marched back to their SUVs, tires spitting gravel as they sped off. I stood there for a long minute, heart pounding, the pine-scented air suddenly sour. How could they think they had authority over land I'd legally purchased? More importantly, what did enforcement mean? Inside, I pulled out the deed and spread it across the kitchen counter. Lot number, county stamp, signature, all perfect. My realtor hadn't lied. Still, doubt gnawed at me. HOAs were notorious for power plays, and Pine Hollow was known for aggressive tactics. If they were bold enough to send security, what would they try next? My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor down the road, an older man named Harold who'd lived in these hills his whole life. Saw Pine Hollow trucks headed your way. Is everything okay? I replied with a quick rundown. His answer came back in seconds. Figures. They've been itching to expand. Don't back down. They've tried this before. Before I could type a response, the distant roar of engines reached my ears again. More vehicles. More trouble. The growl of engines grew louder until 3 more white SUVs rounded the bend, their Pine Hollow logos gleaming in the afternoon sun. They parked in a neat row across my driveway like a barricade. This time, 4 people stepped out, 2 in security uniforms, 1 in a tailored blazer, and another carrying a clipboard. The man in the blazer led the group, his neatly parted hair and polished shoes screaming HOA board members. He strode toward my porch with the confidence of someone who thought the world belonged to him. "Good afternoon," he said, though his tight smile carried no warmth. "I'm Martin Crowley, president of the Pine Hollow Homeowners Association. You are trespassing on Pine Hollow property. I need you to leave immediately." I remained seated on the porch step, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Crowley, I'm not trespassing. This cabin is in Maple County, outside your HOA. I own it. I have the deed and tax records to prove it." Crowley raised a brow and extended his hand as if expecting me to hand over my documents. "Let's have a look, then." I pulled the envelope from my jacket and held it tightly. "You can look, but you're not taking anything." His smile thinned. "Our maps show this land as part of Pine Hollow's expansion parcel. We voted on annexation last quarter. That gives us jurisdiction." Annexation? My stomach dropped. My realtor had mentioned that HOAs sometimes tried to annex neighboring properties, but it required county approval, a long legal process. Surely they couldn't just vote my land into their kingdom. "You can vote on whatever you want," I said carefully, "but unless the county recorder signs off, your vote means nothing. This parcel is mine, free and clear." Crowley's eyes hardened. "We'll see about that. Until this is resolved, you're violating Pine Hollow bylaws by making alterations to the structure. Those tools," he gestured toward my neatly stacked lumber, "are not permitted." I almost laughed. "Bylaws don't apply to me. I'm not in your HOA." The female officer from earlier stepped forward, hand resting on her radio. "Sir, refusal to comply may result in a fine and legal action." My patience snapped. "Fine me all you like. You have as much authority here as a mall cop in the next county over." Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. Crowley turned to his clipboard companion, a short man scribbling notes. "Document the violations. We'll file for a cease and desist." "Violations?" I sputtered. "For replacing a railing on my own porch?" He ignored me and started dictating, "Unapproved structural modifications, unauthorized occupancy, that did it." I pulled out my phone and hit record. "This is private property," I said loudly for the camera. "You are trespassing. Leave now or I'll call the sheriff." The man with the clipboard faltered, glancing at Crowley. Crowley, however, stood his ground. "You can call whoever you like. Pine Hollow will pursue legal remedies." "Great," I said. "Then you won't mind if the sheriff explains your lack of jurisdiction." I dialed the county sheriff's office on speaker. As the phone rang, the uniformed officer shifted uncomfortably. "Maple County Sheriff, how can we help you?" the dispatcher answered. "Yes," I said clearly. "This is Alex Carter. I'm at my property on Cedar Ridge Road. HOA security from Pine Hollow is trespassing and refusing to leave. I need an officer out here, please." The dispatcher confirmed my location and promised a deputy would arrive shortly. I ended the call and met Crowley's gaze. They'll be here soon. You might want to explain your annexation theory to them. Crowley's jaw tightened. We'll wait. For the next 20 minutes, tension hung heavy in the mountain air. The security officers lingered near their SUVs, murmuring into radios. Crowley paced like a general awaiting reinforcements. I sat on the porch rail I'd been measuring earlier, my phone camera still rolling. Finally, a dusty county cruiser rolled up the driveway. Deputy Lewis, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, stepped out, hand resting casually on his belt. "Afternoon, folks," he said, scanning the group. "Who's the property owner?" I raised my hand. "That's me. Alex Carter." "And these folks?" he asked. Crowley stepped forward. "Martin Crowley, Pine Hollow HOA. This property falls within our association's jurisdiction. Mr. Carter is in violation of our covenants and must vacate." Lewis raised an eyebrow. "You have county documentation for that claim?" Crowley produced a folder of papers. Lewis flipped through them slowly, then handed them back. "These are internal HOA meeting notes. That's not a deed or a county annexation order." Crowley's ears flushed red. "We've submitted annexation paperwork." "Submitted isn't approved," Lewis said firmly. "Until the county recorder signs it, this land belongs to Mr. Carter, and Pine Hollow has zero authority here. You and your security team are trespassing. Pack it up." Mini cliffhanger, Crowley's composure cracked. Crowley opened his mouth, but Lewis held up a hand. "Now." The security officers exchanged nervous glances. Slowly, they climbed into their SUVs. Crowley lingered, his eyes cold. "This isn't over, Mr. Carter." I smiled just enough to be infuriating. "Good. I'd hate for you to quit before the county clerk laughs you out of her office." He spun on his heel and stalked to his vehicle. Gravel sprayed as the Pine Hollow convoy retreated down the driveway. Deputy Lewis watched them go before turning back to me. "They've pulled this stunt before," he said. "Keep your deed handy and document everything. If they come back, call us immediately." I thanked him and he left, leaving me with a driveway full of tire tracks and a gnawing sense of unfinished business. Because Crowley was right about one thing, this wasn't over. And I wasn't about to let Pine Hollow's power-hungry president bully me off my own land. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, flashes of Mark's smug grin danced in my mind, mixed with the sound of boots crunching across my gravel driveway. I kept replaying the incident in my head, Mark calling me a trespasser on land I legally owned. Who was this man to think he could dictate my life on my own property? By sunrise, my frustration had fermented into a clear plan. If the HOA thought they could bully me, I'd show them exactly how wrong they were. The paper trail begins. The first call I made was to my real estate attorney, a meticulous woman named Sarah Reeves who specialized in land disputes. After a brief rundown of what happened, she laughed, a sharp, knowing laugh. "Sarah, they actually tried to kick you off land you own? Classic HOA overreach. Send me every document you have, the deed, the survey, the closing paperwork. We'll make sure they regret knocking on your door." Within an hour, I scanned and emailed everything. Sarah confirmed what I already knew. My cabin sat entirely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. No shared roads. No shared utilities. Nothing to justify their interference. "Sarah, they have zero legal authority. But don't confront them yet. Let me draft a certified notice first. Sometimes it's better to let the paperwork speak louder than fists." Her calm confidence gave me a rush of relief. Finally, someone was in my corner, and she spoke fluent legal intimidation. Mark makes a move while Sarah worked her legal magic. Mark wasn't slowing down. 2 days later, I arrived at the cabin with fresh supplies, paint samples, lumber, a box of shiny brass door handles, to find a bright orange notice nailed to my porch post. It read, "Stop work order issued by Cedar Ridge HOA Security. All construction must cease until compliance is verified." I actually laughed out loud. They might as well have signed it because Mark said so. I ripped the notice down and tossed it in the trash. 10 minutes later, a white SUV rolled up, hazard lights blinking. Of course, Mark again, wearing mirrored sunglasses like he was auditioning for a bad cop show. "Mark, you can't ignore official notices." "Me, this isn't official. It's a piece of paper you printed at Kinko's." "Mark, if you don't stop, we'll escalate. There are fines." "Me, fines? For what? Existing?" He bristled, gripping his clipboard. "Mark, you're being difficult. The HOA protects property values. You will attend a compliance meeting." "Me, here's my RSVP, I'll attend when pigs fly and you produce a court order." I turned my back and carried a toolbox inside. Through the window, I watched him fume, then stomp to his SUV. His tires spat gravel as he sped away. Good. Let him stew. Reinforcements. The following morning, Sarah emailed me a draft of the certified cease and desist letter she planned to send to the Cedar Ridge HOA board. It was a masterpiece of polite annihilation, citing county property records, zoning laws, and a hefty reminder that harassment on private property could carry civil penalties. Sarah's note at the bottom: print a copy and keep it on site. If they return, hand it to them. Calmly. I followed her instructions to the letter. A heavy envelope now sat in a waterproof folder by the front door like a loaded weapon, legal ammo ready to fire. But I wasn't stopping there. My brother-in-law, Derek, happened to be a licensed contractor and a master at dealing with stubborn neighborhood busybodies. I called him up. "Me, feel like a weekend getaway? Bring your tool belt." "Derek, does it involve ticked-off HOA people? Because I live for that." Within hours, Derek and his crew were on board. Not only would we accelerate the renovation, but their presence, a team of professionals with permits in hand, would make any HOA snooping look ridiculous. Small victories that weekend. The cabin came alive with the sounds of saws, hammers, and country music blaring from Derek's Bluetooth speaker. We replaced rotten boards, reinforced the deck, and even installed a brand new doorbell camera. Every nail we drove felt like a small victory. Sure enough, Mark couldn't resist. On Saturday afternoon, he returned with a partner, a stern woman clutching a clipboard thicker than a phone book. They parked at the foot of the drive and marched up as if they were serving royal decrees. "Clipboard lady, this is a restricted construction site. We need to verify your permits." "Me, this is private land, and you're trespassing. Step back." "Mark, you can't just..." Derek, grinning. "Oh, but we can. County permits are posted right there on the door. Maybe you should read before you speak." Clipboard lady faltered, eyes flicking to the official county paperwork Derek had proudly taped to the frame. Mark's face reddened to the color of a ripe tomato. "Me, handing Sarah's letter, and while you're reading, here's a notice from my attorney. Kindly share it with your board before you make another illegal visit." The woman took the envelope, her bravado cracking. Mark tried to interject, but Derek raised a finger. "Derek, careful, buddy. My camera's recording every word. Smile for the HOA highlight reel." Mark's jaw tightened. They retreated to their SUV without another word. Watching their taillights disappear felt like winning a championship game. The neighbor network that evening, as we grilled burgers on the new deck, a pickup truck slowed near the end of the drive. An older man with a warm smile leaned out. "Neighbor, heard the HOA's been sniffing around. Don't let them push you. They tried that nonsense with me years ago." "Me, seriously? Even out here? Neighbor, yep. They think everything within a mile is theirs. Good for you for standing your ground. His words carried more weight than he probably realized. It wasn't just about one cabin, it was about refusing to be bullied by people who thrive on control. Escalation behind the scenes. Monday morning, Sarah called with an update. Sarah, their board received my letter. Guess what? They're claiming it's all a misunderstanding. They only meant to ensure safety. Me, safety? They nailed a stop work order to my porch. Sarah, exactly. Which is why I'm filing a harassment claim with the county. Let's keep the pressure on. I could almost hear Mark grinding his teeth from miles away. But Sarah wasn't done. Sarah, one more thing. If they show up again, call the sheriff's department immediately. I've already briefed them. Next time, it's trespassing charges. The thought of Mark being escorted off my property by deputies was almost too delicious to imagine. The calm before the big play with Sarah handling the legal side, Derek and I focused on finishing the renovation. Each day the cabin transformed, fresh cedar siding replaced faded boards, new windows gleamed in the sunlight, and the old stone fireplace came alive with a roaring flame. Despite the steady progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wasn't done. People like him rarely back off quietly. There would be one more move, one desperate attempt to reassert control. And when it came, I intended to be ready. So I kept the letter by the door, cameras rolling, and my phone charged with Sarah on speed dial. Whatever game Mark and his HOA planned next, I'd meet it head-on. The air the next morning carried the crisp bite of late autumn. My brother-in-law Derek was already brewing coffee on the porch when I joined him. We were both waiting, not because we had anything left to prove with hammers or nails, but because we knew Mark wasn't finished. Bullies rarely quit after a single defeat. They just look for a new angle. The emergency meeting, the first sign of trouble, arrived by email around 9 a.m. My phone buzzed with a subject line that made me snort. Subject, urgent HOA compliance meeting, attendance required. On land that wasn't theirs? The message, sent from a Cedar Ridge HOA account, accused me of creating unsafe conditions by carrying out unapproved construction activities adjacent to HOA property. They demanded I appear at their clubhouse that evening to discuss immediate compliance remedies. Derek leaned over my shoulder and read aloud. Derek, immediate compliance remedies. That's lawyer speak for we don't like you, so stop existing. Me, exactly. And look, no signature from a government official, just their board chair. Pure theater. Still, I forwarded the email to Sarah. Within minutes she replied with her usual calm precision, Sarah, do not attend. This is another attempt to establish jurisdiction. I'm contacting the sheriff's department now to put them on notice. Her certainty gave me a strange mix of adrenaline and relief. We weren't just waiting anymore, we were preparing. Mark's last stand by mid-afternoon, a convoy of 3 SUVs rumbled up my gravel driveway. Out stepped Mark, his mirrored sunglasses gleaming, flanked by 2 other men and the clipboard woman from before. They looked like a discount version of a SWAT team, complete with matching navy windbreakers embroidered with Cedar Ridge HOA security. I switched on the porch camera and stepped outside, coffee mug in hand. Me, morning, Mark. Nice jackets. Did the costume shop have a sale? Mark, this is an official safety inspection. You are required to stop work and vacate the premises until we verify permits. Me, required by who? Your embroidery machine? His jaw tightened. Mark, failure to comply will result in fines and legal action. Me, funny you should mention legal action. My attorney asked me to give you this. I held out a crisp envelope, Sarah's updated cease and desist, now including a formal harassment claim and a copy of the county sheriff's notice. Mark hesitated, then snatched it like a child grabbing a confiscated toy. Clipboard woman, this doesn't change the fact that you're endangering property values. Derek, grinning, the only thing endangered is your credibility. County permits are posted right there. Maybe read them before you embarrass yourselves again. Mark's face reddened, but before he could respond, the distant growl of another engine echoed down the road. Flashing lights of Black County Sheriff's SUV rolled to a stop behind their convoy, blue lights pulsing against the cedar trees. Out stepped Deputy Ramirez, a tall woman with an expression that could freeze boiling water. She adjusted her hat and strode toward us. Deputy Ramirez, afternoon. We received a call about a potential trespassing and harassment issue. Who's the property owner? Me, raising my hand. That's me. Here's my deed and ID. She glanced at the paperwork, then turned her gaze on Mark. Deputy Ramirez, and you are? Mark Stevenson, Cedar Ridge HOA Security Chief. We're here to enforce compliance. Deputy Ramirez, let me stop you right there. This property is outside your HOA jurisdiction. You have no enforcement authority here. Mark sputtered. Mark, but property values, Deputy Ramirez, not your concern. If you or your team set foot on this property again without invitation, you'll be cited for trespassing. Clear? The silence that followed was delicious. Even the wind seemed to pause. Clipboard woman opened her mouth, thought better of it, and shut it again. Mark's cheeks turned the color of a ripe tomato. Deputy Ramirez, Mr. Stevenson, I suggest you escort your team off this property immediately. They retreated to their SUVs without another word, engines growling like embarrassed guard dogs. Derek couldn't resist a final jab. Derek, hey Mark. Next time bring popcorn, we'll screen the porch cam footage. The deputy smirked as the convoy disappeared down the road. Community applause. The very next day, my mailbox overflowed, not with HOA threats, but with handwritten notes from nearby property owners. Word travels fast in rural communities, especially when the sheriff gets involved. One letter stood out from a neighbor named Betty, who'd lived on the ridge for 30 years. Good for you for standing up to those bullies. They've been trying to expand their reach for years. Most of us just wanted someone brave enough to say no. Thank you. Another envelope contained a batch of fresh blueberry muffins with a sticky note, welcome to the neighborhood. We're glad someone finally put Mark in his place. I realized then that this fight wasn't only about my cabin. It was about drawing a line for everyone who'd been quietly intimidated by an HOA that had forgotten its limits. A cabin transformed with the legal battles effectively over, Derek and I focused on finishing what we'd started. We sanded the deck until the cedar shone golden in the sunlight. The new windows framed sweeping views of pine-clad hills. At night, the stone fireplace crackled warmly as we celebrated small victories over mugs of hot cocoa. One evening, as twilight settled across the ridge, Derek leaned back in his chair and grinned. Derek, you didn't just renovate a cabin. You renovated the neighborhood's backbone. Me, maybe. But mostly, I just wanted a quiet place to watch the stars. Derek, mission accomplished, with bonus entertainment. We laughed until the sound echoed through the valley. A letter of surrender. A week later, Sarah forwarded me an official letter from the Cedar Ridge HOA board. It was a masterclass in backpedaling. After reviewing the relevant property records, we acknowledge that your land is outside the jurisdiction of Cedar Ridge HOA. We regret any misunderstanding and assure you that no further action will be taken. Misunderstanding, of course, being their polite way of saying we got caught. Sarah added a short note of her own. Sarah, frame this. It's better than a hunting trophy. I printed the letter and pinned it above the fireplace, right next to a photo of the cabin taken on the day I first bought it. Proof that some battles end not with shouting, but with quiet, undeniable victory. Looking ahead now, each morning as sunlight filters through the tall pines, I sip my coffee on the deck and breathe in the crisp mountain air, free of orange notices, fake stop work orders, and HOA intrusions. The cabin stands exactly as I envisioned, a sanctuary built not just with cedar and stone, but with perseverance. Neighbors occasionally stop by with pies or stories about the day the HOA got schooled. We laugh, share muffins, and talk about hiking trails instead of compliance meetings. And when I hear the distant hum of an SUV on the gravel road, I don't tense anymore. I just smile, because this ridge finally feels like what I dreamed it would be, mine. The first weekend of December, I finally invited friends, family, and the new neighbors who'd welcomed me so kindly to celebrate the cabin's completion. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the mountain air, dusting the cedar railings and making the entire property look like a scene from a Christmas card. Inside, the wood stove hummed with warmth, and the smell of cinnamon cider mingled with the scent of fresh pine. For the first time since signing those nerve-wracking papers, I felt like a true owner, free, secure, and surrounded by people who understood why I'd fought so hard. A not-so-silent arrival just after sunset, when the party was in full swing, a familiar set of headlights appeared on the distant ridge road. Derek, standing near the big-picture window, leaned forward. "Derek, you've got to be kidding me. Guess who just pulled up?" "Me. If it's Santa, he's early. If it's Mark, he's late and unwelcome." Sure enough, a dark SUV crawled up the driveway, tires crunching over frozen gravel. Mark stepped out, wearing a heavy coat and the same mirrored sunglasses despite the night sky. Behind him trailed the clipboard woman and 2 HOA board members I hadn't met before. They moved with stiff determination, like actors unsure of their next line. My guests fell silent as the group approached the porch. Betty, the neighbor who'd sent blueberry muffins, muttered under her breath. "Betty, this should be good." Mark's final performance. I stepped outside, careful to leave the door wide enough for everyone inside to hear. "Me, evening, Mark." Careful on the steps, they're freshly sanded. "Mark, we wanted to extend a formal apology on behalf of Cedar Ridge HOA." His words sounded like they'd been dragged over gravel. "Clipboard woman, we recognize that this property is not under our jurisdiction. Our previous actions were based on incomplete information." The crowd inside chuckled softly. Someone whispered, "Incomplete ego." "Me, apology accepted. Would you like some cider? It might help wash down all that humble pie." The porch erupted in laughter. Mark winced but managed a tight smile. "Mark, actually, yes. That would be nice." I motioned them inside. The board members hesitated, but the aroma of cinnamon and the sight of neighbors laughing seemed to disarm them. Breaking the ice, literally inside, Derek handed Mark a steaming mug. "Derek, careful, it's hot. But not as hot as the legal letter we sent you." Even Mark laughed at that, a short, reluctant chuckle. The tension in the room melted like ice near the wood stove. Betty seized the moment. "Betty, Mark, we've all lived with your HOA long enough to know you care about the neighborhood. But maybe next time, start with a friendly hello instead of a clipboard." Her dry wit drew appreciative nods from the UK expats in the room. One elderly Canadian guest added with a grin, "Canadian guest, and maybe a polite sorry for good measure." Mark, sheepish fair point. I may have gotten carried away. It was almost surreal watching the self-styled security chief admit he'd been out of line. A neighborhood reclaimed. As the evening wore on, conversations shifted from apologies to plans for hiking trails, potluck dinners, and a spring cleanup of the shared county road. People who'd once tiptoed around the HOA were now speaking freely, trading ideas for a more cooperative, voluntary community group. I realized that my fight hadn't just protected my own rights, it had cracked open a door for everyone else. By standing up to the overreach, I'd given neighbors the courage to reclaim their own voices. Sarah, my attorney, arrived late after finishing a case in town. When she stepped inside, the room erupted in cheers. "Sarah, I leave you alone for a week and you turn a legal standoff into a Christmas party?" "Me, you taught me to negotiate. I just added cider." Mark raised his mug in a reluctant toast. "Mark, to property rights, and maybe to better neighbors." "Me, I'll drink that." The group clinked mugs, the sound ringing warm and clear against the cedar walls. Quiet victory later, after the last guest departed and the snow began to fall heavier, I stood alone on the porch. The forest shimmered under a silver moon, and the cabin lights glowed like a beacon against the dark ridge. This was what I dreamed of, a place where silence was peaceful, not tense, where laughter came from friends, not nervous neighbors whispering about fines and letters. The framed HOA acknowledgement letter above the fireplace wasn't just a trophy. It was a reminder that standing your ground, politely but firmly, can change more than your own life. It can ripple through an entire community. Epilogue: the spring trail. By spring, a new tradition had taken root. Neighbors, including a noticeably mellowed Mark, gathered monthly to maintain the old county hiking trail that wound between our properties. We shared sandwiches, swapped stories, and laughed about the Great Cabin Showdown, as they called it. Mark even helped me install a handcrafted wooden sign at the trailhead. It read, "Welcome to Cedar Ridge Public Trail. No HOA approval required." He hammered in the final nail, then turned to me with a crooked grin. "Mark, guess we both learned something, huh?" Me, yeah. A little respect goes a long way. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers across the ridge. For the first time, Mark extended his hand. "Mark, neighbors?" Me, neighbors. We shook on it, the handshake sealing not just a truce, but a hard-won understanding. Final reflection: when I first bought this cabin, I imagined weekends of quiet renovation and starlit evenings, not legal battles and sheriff's visits. But sometimes the fight you didn't plan for becomes a story worth telling. The cabin is beautiful now, but the real victory isn't the polished cedar or the mountain view. It's the freedom to enjoy them without fear of someone claiming power they don't have. And every time I see that trail sign, I remember, boundaries matter, but community matters more.